Good day and welcome back to the PharmCook kitchen. Today we've got a treat. It's Sunday and that means meatballs and sauce. But I'm only using 1 can of tomatoes. Welcome back to the PharmCook channel. This is the place where you get to eat well, have fun, and hopefully learn lots, especially about low carb and keto cooking. So now let's get ready and make some dinner. So this is one of my favorite things to do on a weekend is to make some sauce and some meatballs. And what I'm going to be doing is taking this large can of San Marzano tomatoes and turning them into a delicious sauce that I'm going to partially cook the meatballs in. And that's going to be Sunday dinner. And my wife is going to enjoy that with some pasta. I'm not. I'm just going to have the meatballs. It's going to be delicious. And the way that I go about making meatballs is to start off with a whole bunch of ground beef because, you need that. I don't typically do a mix of other kinds of protein. It's really just ground beef. And it's bound with a little bit of the tomatoes that are from the can, as well as some ricotta and some Parmesan cheese, as well as eggs and seasoning. But the cheese and the tomato not only provide moisture, but they also provide a way of keeping things together and tender despite not having any breadcrumbs or any sort of filler kinds of things aside from the cheeses. So let's get started. So what's needed for the sauce? What's needed for the meatballs? So we need some tomatoes. Got this giant can of tomatoes. All I'm going to do is grab a couple of them, squish them up, break them up, so that provides some moisture and some, so a bit of flavor. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's exactly how much I'm getting. 5 tomatoes worth, and I'm just going to break them up by hand. And this is going to help create some of the texture, some of the moisture, some of the flavor for the meatballs. The rest of that can is going to be turned into sauce. But the meatballs go first. And there are a couple little bits from the ends of the tomato. Take a little bit more squishing, but not too much. And if it's really tough, you just pitch it. I think this guy's pretty stringy, gnarly. But that's him. 3 pounds of ground beef, ground chuck, 80/20 from Walmart. I don't typically spend a lot of money on or go for a higher grade of meat for meatballs because there's so many other flavors in it. I've tried American Wagyu beef to make meatballs, and I don't really taste a huge amount of difference. So these guys are cheap and readily available. So that's what I'm using. That's that. Other stuff that's going in. Some leftover ricotta. Oops. So this is not quite a pound of ricotta. It's probably about 12 ounces or so. What else is going in? Some seasonings. I've got onion powder, a little bit of garlic powder, sazon completo, a little bit of fresh black pepper, and that's what's going in. And then a couple of eggs. So I typically do 1 egg per pound of beef. Doesn't have to be perfectly mixed, but it helps to make sure that the egg is really well broken up. So that's going to make things really, really sticky. And this shuggeda cheese is going to help keep things together. So it's about half a cup, 3/4 of a cup that's going in right now. And we'll see. If I need to adjust, we'll need to adjust. Now it's just a matter of mixing. So this is what is the result of mixing for the last, 5 minutes or so. only took a couple minutes to put together. So the meat is definitely a different color. It's a little more pink. That's just because of adding the ricotta, the white cheese. It's not going to impact the flavor in a major way. It'll add some fat and some texture, but not a huge amount of flavor. Ricotta doesn't have a huge amount of flavor. So I find it works really, really well for making low-carb meatballs. So the next step in the process is just scoop up some ground beef mix. You'll notice there's a little bit of tomato on the outside, and that's okay. As I was going through and mixing, I was breaking up whatever pieces that were fairly large that I encountered. But yeah, it's pretty well mixed. And now it's just a matter of making some meatballs, and this is not rocket surgery. Just trying to make sure that they're approximately uniform size. Not always easy unless you weigh them, but it's important to remember that these guys are going to shrink, right? This is the beef that I'm using is an 80-20, so at least 20% of this is not going to be there after these guys are cooked. So, and I'm cooking them on a rack so that the fat drains away. Or at least that's the hope. We'll see. And they don't take terribly long to cook because, or at least not in the oven, because what we're really doing is hoping that they're going to get set a little bit of a crust on the outside, so that provides some texture for them. And then we'll finish them in the sauce. So we'll cook them approximately 20-25 minutes at about 375. We're already up to temperature, so I just got to get cranking on making these meatballs. And once these guys go in the oven, that's when I'm going to start working on the sauce. And the sauce is quite tasty, very easy, something that anybody can do. And that is really sauteed onions, tomatoes. That's pretty much it. Some salt. I've definitely evolved over time with my red sauce. I started off cooking life, thinking tomato sauce is flavorful. That means adding a whole bunch of seasonings, a whole bunch of oregano and basil and as I've learned over time, my preference is keep it simple. Just tomatoes, onions, salt. The tomatoes happen to have some little bits of basil in it, but that's going to be it. Keeping it simple, and from my experience, that's just something that I prefer. And a recent discovery, although I don't have any right now, is that the type of tomato makes a big difference. These are San Marzano tomatoes, so they're a very good quality. Happen to be Cento brand, but I've used other San Marzano. Something that I tried the last time I made sauce was canned cherry tomatoes. Canned cherry tomatoes rock. I just don't happen to have any right now, so maybe the next batch. Oops, that's a little large. But yeah, my evolution with sauce is keep it simple. It's the same sort of process, same approach that I use in making pizza sauce. It's just really about the tomato, so don't mess it up with all the other stuff. You don't need to. And in fact, it's better when you just keep it simple. My understanding is that there's a restaurant in New York City called Patsy's that was Frank Sinatra's favorite place to eat, and I had seen one of the cooking shows. I can't remember which channel it was, Food TV or what, but they talked to the chef that was one of the guys that used to prepare the red sauce when Sinatra was frequenting the place, and he said onions and tomatoes, a little bit of salt, but that was it. So obviously your sauce, you do what you want, but this works well for me. So I'm just going to continue on, and yeah, we're almost there. These guys are ready. Oven's heated. Time to go in. 375. We'll cook those about 20-25 minutes, maybe turn them in between. Just trying to get a little bit of a crust on the outside before they go into the sauce. So let's start making some sauce. The next step in this process, sauteing the onions to create a bit of a foundation of flavor. And to do that, I'm going to use a couple of tablespoons of butter and then some avocado oil. And after that, it's just mixing the onions around. We don't want them to necessarily caramelize. I mean, you can, it's up to you. I enjoy having the onions get to be soft and relatively translucent and then adding the tomatoes. So this sauce, although it's really only a couple ingredients, it does take a while to actually allow all of the flavors to fully develop and come together. It's pretty easy. It just takes a little bit of time. So the butter and oil is in. Now we've got the onions going. We're just gonna mix those around. And they're kind of just sliced right now because our family prefers a very uniform sauce. Like, we're not going crazy and passing it through a sieve, but I'm gonna use a food processor to break up the big pieces of onion and the big pieces of tomato from the whole tomatoes. And that's just, again, it's a preference thing. So you guys, you do what you do, but that's what we do. And you can always experiment. I mean, that's the great thing about cooking. You can figure out what it is that works well for you. If you decide you like a more rustic sauce that has not been through a food processor, great, now you know. But I hope people get inspired to actually try stuff because, frankly, this is not hard. It does take some time, takes a little bit of prep, takes a little bit of cleanup, but I'm going to have a very nice protein and several meals for the week from this couple of hours of cooking. And I don't know, especially as we're getting towards fall, we're just about ready to start the football season. Very, very excited for the Ravens this year. But football season reminds me of pasta sauce. It reminds me of the fall and winter. You know, it seems like this seems like the kind of food that you have during those times. So it's not. I mean, you can have red sauce and meatballs any time of year. It's delicious, but I don't know. It's just evokes a memory. One of the things that I experienced growing up or heard about growing up was my father was the one that taught my mom how to make or how to cook. She, I think, had a more limited exposure to things. He grew up in New York City and had lots of really cool eating opportunities, even, you know, back in the 40s, 50s, etc. But my father taught my mom how to make red sauce. Not that this is anything like what he would make. It's just, I don't know, it's memories. So we're just going to let these cook down a little bit, and then we're going to add the tomatoes and let that start cooking while the meatballs are in the oven cooking. So this is where the onions are after about 10 minutes of just a skosh over medium obviously on my stove, but you get an idea of how quickly or slowly the onions are starting to break down and become more limp, and some of them are getting translucent. So we're just at the point, or pretty near the point where it's ready. It's time to add the tomatoes. We're getting there. So this is about, I don't know, 8-10 minutes of cook time. And you can see how the the onions are starting to break down. They're losing their their structure, they've given up their moisture, and now they're starting to become more translucent. So I think it's time now to add the tomatoes. We're going to keep cooking these guys for a while, so the onions will definitely keep cooking and developing their flavor. But now is the time to add a whole bunch of tomatoes. It's just one can. Just making sure everybody gets mixed in. Start the tomatoes on their process of breaking down and releasing their moisture and creating the sauce. That's it. Here we are. Sauce is bubbling. Tomatoes are starting to break down. Everything is getting integrated. It's wonderful. All I'm doing is moving things around a little bit, and if I see a big whole tomato, just poking at it, trying to help break it down a little bit faster. Don't have to go buck willy, but I think manually breaking the integrity of the outside of the tomato helps the process a little bit, speeds things up. And then we're going to go after it with a food processor or immersion blender a little bit. Next stage for me, I know from experience that I need a couple of cans of tomato paste to help thicken it and create a really good body. So I'm going to add those guys right now. I had a uncle, my wife's side of the family, who believed that it was important to add tomato paste at the very end of the process, and his perspective was it would change the character, change the flavor a bit. If you cooked the tomato paste too long, it would actually make the sauce a little bit more bitter. It's not been my experience, and I like going through the process of breaking it down with the immersion blender. With the tomato paste in, so that it gets fully integrated into the sauce. So that's what I'm doing. Plus you need a little bit of time for the tomato paste to cook to get rid of the flavor of the can, which happens when you use it and don't cook it down and use it right away. It'll definitely have an off flavor. All right, those guys are in. I'm just gonna mix them around. Meatballs are getting there. They need another, I don't know. There's a couple minutes left on the timer. We're gonna check them then, but I think the rack is working. I was hoping to use the rack to help not need to flip the meatballs partway through. There would be enough space for air to circulate around the meatball. Or each meatball to then be able to get it brown on all sides. And it seems like it's kind of working. We'll find out. All right, so this is where the sauce is at after about, I don't know, 25 minutes or so. It's bubbling, not super aggressively, but things are definitely coming together. And the tomatoes are mostly broken down. There's still some chunks, like there's a pretty good sized piece right there. So I'm gonna go after these guys with the immersion blender. This is just a basic, Costco purchase, not something not something fancy. Just to break everything up. I'm gonna try my best not to make a big mess. So that's it. The sauce is now pretty smooth and uniform. Clean that up a bit, but yeah. Now we just need some thyme, not the herb, just cooking time. And in another minute or two, I'm going to drop the meatballs in to finish their cooking in the sauce. I think that provides a lot of flavor for the meatballs as well as some flavor for the sauce. And by the way, I need to add some salt. I haven't added anything yet because I think it's a total of 90 ounces of tomatoes. Tomatoes need a lot of salt, so I'm going to put in probably a tablespoon or so and then test in a bit. But yeah, we'll see. It's coming together. And again, this is about 30 minutes in. This is not something that I've been slaving over the stove for hours. It's going to be over an hour once everything's all said and done, but the next step in the process is just a low, slow heat to finish cooking the sauce and to finish cooking the meatballs. So we're almost at the point where it's just going to need to sit for a little bit. All right, so let's take a look at the meatballs, see where they are. So that's where the meatballs are. I don't know if you can see that or not, but the pan is very heavy and it's got a bunch of oil in the bottom, but there's a little browning, a little crust on the edge. That's exactly what I was looking for. That's going to help keep the meatballs together when they go into the tomato sauce. So, and I didn't have to fiddle with them and move them, but they may have sunk a little bit into the rack. So we'll see. I might end up with meaty pieces in the sauce. But now it's just a matter of getting these guys into the sauce to finish cooking and having the sauce finish cooking. So that's what I'm going to do. So the grid idea was not a complete success. There was stickage. And some of the meatballs broke apart. It's very disappointing. I think the concept works, but this grid has spaces that are too wide. I need to use a finer grid. I don't know. We'll see. You got to experiment. Got to try stuff out. So that's the sauce. That's the meatballs. All I'm doing is going to let those guys cook for another, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes, an hour. And then we'll be ready for pasta, for those that are enjoying it, sauce, and meatballs. So it's now been, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes or so that the sauce and the meatballs have been just hanging out, bubbling away on a relatively low heat. I've boosted it a little bit, but it's not an aggressive boil. It's just little sputters here and there. Been just letting it cook down, let everybody integrate. What I'm going to do now is just give it a test, see what the meatballs are like. Unfortunately, yeah, they didn't work ideally with that grid, but let's throw in a meatball and some sauce, see how it goes, see if the seasoning needs to be adjusted. So just a little meatball, a little part of a meatball actually. It's totally cooked, very hot, so hopefully I don't burn my face off. So meatball is nice and tender. It's very well seasoned, very flavorful. I think the sauce needs a little bit of salt. But that's it. So this is a great weekend kind of a dish. You know, when you really need a little bit of time to let the dish cook and really just build that complexity. But this is really very simple, very straightforward. Tomatoes, onions, some butter, some oil, meatballs. Easy. And so good. It's going to make a great Sunday dinner. Give it a shot. Tell me what you think. Thanks.